Most people fear loneliness more than death itself. They'll enter toxic relationships, endure emotional abuse, and sacrifice their authentic selves just to avoid the terror of being alone. But what if I told you that your fear of loneliness is exactly what's destroying your life? Arthur Schopenhauer, one of history's most brutally honest philosophers, spent his entire life alone by choice. Not because he couldn't find love, but because he understood something most people never will. He discovered that the desperate pursuit of love and companionship is actually a biological trap that enslaves you to suffering, mediocrity, and the complete destruction of your inner peace. According to Schopenhauer, what you call love is nothing more than nature's cruel trick to ensure reproduction. It's the will to life using you as a puppet, making you believe you need another person to be complete. But here's the truth that will shatter everything you've been taught. The moments you felt most alive, most creative, most powerful in your entire life, you were alone. Watch this video until the very end, and Schopenhauer's philosophy will reveal why loneliness isn't your enemy. It's your greatest liberation. Let's dive into what Schopenhauer called the metaphysics of sexual love. When you look at someone and feel that magnetic pull, that instant connection, that sense of destiny, your brain convinces you this is special, meaningful, perhaps even fate. Society calls it chemistry, romance, or finding your soulmate. Schopenhauer called it what it actually is: the will to life hijacking your consciousness for its own purposes. Your genes don't care about your happiness, your peace, or your personal growth. They care about one thing only: replicating themselves into the next generation. That attraction you feel, that overwhelming desire to be with someone, isn't about you at all. It's your DNA evaluating potential genetic combinations, calculating whether this person's traits would complement yours to produce viable offspring. Think about how disturbing this actually is. Every time you've fallen in love, you weren't experiencing elevated human connection. You were experiencing sophisticated genetic programming, making you believe you need someone else to feel complete. The person you think you can't live without, your brain chose them based on unconscious calculations about facial symmetry, hip-to-waist ratios, immune system compatibility, and reproductive fitness. You're not in love, you're being used by biology. Schopenhauer wrote that nature is more concerned with the species than with individuals. You're just a temporary vehicle for genes that have been using human bodies for millions of years. Your feelings, your dreams, your desire for meaningful connection, all of it is secondary to nature's primary directive: reproduce and continue the species. This is why love makes you temporarily insane. Your rational mind shuts down because nature needs you to make irrational decisions. You ignore red flags, overlook incompatibilities, and convince yourself that this person is different, special, the one. But Schopenhauer understood what you're experiencing isn't insight, it's biological manipulation. The intensity of attraction you feel isn't proportional to how compatible you actually are. It's proportional to how effectively this person's genetic profile complements yours for reproduction. Two people who would make terrible life partners often feel the strongest attraction because their genetics would create the most viable offspring. You've confused genetic compatibility with emotional compatibility, and that confusion will destroy you. During the attraction phase, your brain is flooded with chemicals: dopamine, norepinephrine, phenylethylamine. These aren't love, they're the same compounds released during cocaine use. You're literally getting high on your own neurochemistry, making permanent life decisions while under the influence of naturally produced drugs. Think about every major relationship decision you've made while attracted to someone. Moving in together, getting married, having children, merging your entire life with another person. You made those decisions while your brain chemistry was altered from baseline functioning, while you were incapable of rational thought, while nature was using chemical manipulation to ensure you'd commit to reproduction. Schopenhauer said that immediately after copulation, the devil's laughter is heard. He meant that once nature achieves its goal of getting you to reproduce, the chemicals fade, and you're left wondering what you've done, who this person actually is, and why you ever thought this was a good idea. This is why relationships inevitably deteriorate. You didn't fall out of love. You came down from a drug-induced state and finally saw reality clearly. The person didn't change. Your chemically altered perception of them normalized. But by then, you've already built your entire life around maintaining a high that was never sustainable. Now let's examine what happens when you give in to this biological programming and enter a relationship. Schopenhauer observed that all love relationships follow the same destructive pattern. The honeymoon phase, where chemicals override reality, the power struggle phase, where reality crashes into expectation, and the resentment phase, where both people realize they've sacrificed their autonomy for an illusion. During the honeymoon phase, you convince yourself that merging your life with someone else will solve your existential emptiness. You believe that this person will make you feel complete, give your life meaning, and fill the void you feel inside. Schopenhauer would tell you that void isn't meant to be filled by another person. It's the fundamental nature of existence itself. Trying to fill it through relationship is like trying to fill the ocean with a bucket. The more you pour in, the more you realize the futility of the effort. But you try anyway. You move in together, share finances, intertwine your social circles, and slowly erase the boundaries that once defined you as an individual. What you don't realize is that every compromise you make, every accommodation, every adjustment, you're not building a relationship, you're dismantling yourself. Schopenhauer wrote that we forfeit 3/4 of ourselves in order to be like other people. In relationships, you forfeit even more. The woman who loved solitude and independence starts checking in constantly because he needs reassurance. The man who valued his creative projects abandons them because she needs more attention. The person who had clear goals and aspirations downsizes their dreams to fit into couples' goals that satisfy neither person completely. You call this compromise and maturity. Schopenhauer called it spiritual suicide. You're killing the very essence of what made you interesting, vital, and alive. The qualities that attracted your partner in the first place are systematically destroyed by the relationship itself. Then comes the power struggle phase, where the reality of sustained intimacy crashes into the fantasy you both believed. Your partner starts to annoy you in ways that once seemed charming. Their habits become irritating, their opinions feel wrong, and their very presence begins to drain rather than energize you. This isn't relationship failure. This is relationship reality. Schopenhauer understood that sustained proximity to another person inevitably leads to conflict, because every human being has the will to life operating through them, demanding its own expression. Two wills to life in constant proximity means constant friction, constant negotiation, and constant suppression of authentic desire. Think about what intimacy actually requires. You must coordinate schedules, negotiate preferences, compromise on decisions, and consider another person's needs before your own in every situation. What starts as loving accommodation becomes exhausting obligation. The spontaneous dinner becomes a negotiation about where to eat. The quiet evening becomes a compromise between competing desires for social activity versus solitude. Every single day requires dozens of micro-negotiations that slowly wear down your sense of self. You can't make impulsive decisions anymore. You have to consult. You can't pursue interests freely. You have to balance. You can't follow your authentic desires fully. You have to accommodate. Each negotiation feels minor in isolation, but together they represent the systematic erosion of your sovereignty over your own existence. Schopenhauer observed that relationships are like porcupines huddling together for warmth in winter. Get too close and you prick each other with your quills. Stay too far apart and you freeze. The optimal distance is impossible to maintain because human needs constantly fluctuate. What your partner needed yesterday contradicts what they need today. What made them feel loved last month makes them feel smothered this month. You're constantly adjusting, recalibrating, trying to hit a moving target while your own needs remain unmet because you're too busy managing theirs. This dynamic intensifies when you realize that the person you were with isn't who you thought they were during the chemical high phase. The generous person reveals themselves as controlling. The confident person shows their deep insecurity. The emotionally stable person demonstrates their hidden anxiety and dysfunction. These traits were always there, but your altered brain chemistry prevented you from seeing them clearly. Now, you're legally, financially, and socially bound to someone whose reality contradicts the fantasy you bought into. This leads directly to the resentment phase, where both people feel trapped, misunderstood, and cheated out of the happiness they were promised. He resents that she's no longer the low-maintenance, easygoing woman who seemed so perfect. She resents that he's no longer the attentive, romantic man who pursued her so passionately. Both feel like they're giving more than they're getting, sacrificing more than their partner, suffering more than the other person acknowledges. The truth Schopenhauer would point out is simpler and more painful. Both are resenting the death of illusions that were never real in the first place. You're mourning the loss of chemically induced perceptions, not the loss of actual compatibility or love. Schopenhauer said that all truth passes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. And third, it is accepted as self-evident. The truth about relationships is currently in stage 2. When you suggest that love might be biological manipulation, that relationships might be fundamentally incompatible with human happiness, that solitude might be superior to companionship, people react with hostility and denial. They have to. Because accepting this truth would mean confronting the terrifying possibility that they've wasted years, maybe decades of their lives chasing an illusion that can never deliver what it promises. But let's go deeper into what Schopenhauer discovered about the nature of suffering in relationships. He identified that all suffering comes from wanting. When you want someone to behave differently, respond differently, love you differently, you create the conditions for perpetual disappointment. Relationships are structured entirely around wanting. You want affection, attention, validation, security, and companionship from your partner. They want the same from you. But human beings are fundamentally incapable of consistently meeting another person's needs because we are all prisoners of our own will to life, our own desires, our own suffering. Your partner can't save you from existential emptiness because they're drowning in their own. Think about what you actually want from a relationship. You want someone to make you feel less alone while you're surrounded by 8 billion people on this planet. You want someone to validate your worth when you can't find it within yourself. You want someone to provide meaning for your existence when you haven't developed internal purpose. You're asking another flawed, suffering, confused human being to solve problems they can't solve for themselves, let alone for you. Schopenhauer wrote that life swings like a pendulum between pain and boredom. In relationships, the pendulum swings between the pain of conflict and the boredom of routine. When things are good, you're bored. Everything is predictable, passion is dead, and you wonder if this is really all there is. When things are bad, you're in pain, fighting constantly, feeling misunderstood, and wondering why you ever thought this person could make you happy. There's no winning position in this game, because the game itself is designed to create suffering. Yet most people stay in these relationships not out of love, but out of fear. They're terrified of being alone, of losing their investment, of admitting failure, of facing judgment from family and society. So they remain trapped in situations that slowly destroy their spirit, while pretending everything is fine. What city are you watching this from right now? Think about how many people in your city are sitting right now in relationships that make them miserable, staying because they're more afraid of loneliness than they are of the slow death of staying in the wrong situation. Now let's talk about what Schopenhauer discovered about the power of solitude. After spending most of his life alone, he concluded that a man can be himself only so long as he is alone, and if he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom, for it is only when he is alone that he is really free. This statement contains the key to understanding why loneliness is superior to being loved. When you're alone, you answer to no one but yourself. Your time is completely your own. Your decisions require no negotiation. Your energy is preserved for your own purposes, and your development proceeds uninterrupted by the needs and demands of a partner. You can wake up when you want, eat what you want, spend your evening however you choose. Pursue any interest that calls to you and change direction instantly without consultation or compromise. This isn't selfishness, it's sovereignty over your own existence. In solitude, you have the space and silence necessary for deep thought, creative work, and genuine self-development. Schopenhauer believed that genius could only emerge in solitude because meaningful intellectual and creative work requires sustained, uninterrupted focus that relationships make nearly impossible. Every great philosopher, artist, scientist, and thinker throughout history spent significant portions of their lives in solitude, not because they couldn't find relationships, but because they understood that companionship is fundamentally incompatible with the deep work that creates meaning and legacy. When you're in a relationship, your attention is constantly divided. Part of your mind is always tracking your partner's mood, anticipating their needs, managing conflict, or processing relationship dynamics. This prevents you from achieving the complete absorption in work and thought that produces genuine excellence and insight. Schopenhauer observed that the wise have always said the same thing, and fools, who are the majority, have always done the opposite. The majority seeks constant companionship, validation from others, and the security of relationships because they can't face themselves alone. The wise understand that self-sufficiency is the greatest wealth, that internal peace is more valuable than external validation, and that solitude provides something that relationships never can: complete freedom from the needs and judgments of others. Think about the last time you were completely alone for an extended period. Not lonely and desperate, but genuinely comfortable in your own company, with no one to answer to, no one to please, no one whose mood could affect yours. In those moments, you probably experienced something profound, a sense of peace, clarity, and authenticity that vanishes the moment you re-enter the social world. That's your true nature temporarily freed from the performance required by relationships. Schopenhauer said that ordinary people think merely how they will spend their time. A man of intellect tries to use it. In relationships, your time is spent managing another person's emotions, needs, and expectations. In solitude, your time is invested in your own development, creative expression, and the pursuit of understanding. The difference isn't subtle. It's the difference between living your life and living someone else's expectations of what your life should be. Here's what most people don't understand about loneliness. The painful, empty feeling you associate with being alone isn't actually loneliness. It's the withdrawal from social validation that you've become addicted to. You've been conditioned since childhood to measure your worth by how others respond to you, to feel valuable only when approved of, loved, or desired. Loneliness isn't the pain of being alone. It's the pain of not having your existence validated by others. Schopenhauer would tell you that this validation seeking is your enemy. As long as you need other people to make you feel worthy, you'll never be free. You'll always be a slave to their perceptions, opinions, and approval. You'll twist yourself into whatever shape you think will earn their love, while your authentic self dies unacknowledged and unexpressed. But when you sit with loneliness long enough without trying to escape it through relationships, social media, or constant social activity, something remarkable happens. The pain transforms into peace, the emptiness becomes fullness, and you discover that you're actually complete without needing anyone else. This is what Schopenhauer meant when he wrote that to live alone is the fate of all great souls. He wasn't saying great souls are rejected by others. He was saying that greatness requires the development of such profound self-sufficiency that external validation becomes irrelevant. You stop needing people to complete you because you've become complete in yourself. Let's examine the practical reality of what solitude provides versus what relationships take away. In solitude, you have complete control over your environment. You can create spaces that support your work, creativity, and peace. In relationships, your environment becomes a negotiation, a compromise between different preferences that often satisfies neither person completely. In solitude, your schedule is entirely your own. You can work through the night if inspiration strikes, wake at noon if that serves your rhythm, or structure your day around your peak performance times. In relationships, your schedule must accommodate another person's needs, creating constant interruption of your natural rhythm and flow. In solitude, your money is your own to spend, invest, or save according to your priorities and values. In relationships, financial decisions become battlegrounds where different values, fears, and desires about money create perpetual conflict. In solitude, you can pursue any interest, hobby, or passion without justification or compromise. In relationships, your interests must be balanced against your partner's needs for time, attention, and shared activities. In solitude, your emotional energy is preserved for your own use. In relationships, emotional energy is constantly spent managing your partner's feelings, your relationship dynamics, and the endless minor conflicts that proximity creates. Solitude, you can be completely authentic without performance. In relationships, you're constantly managing impressions, moderating behavior, and performing the version of yourself that maintains harmony. When you add up all these differences, the truth becomes undeniable. Relationships offer companionship at the cost of everything that makes life worth living: freedom, autonomy, peace, creative space, and authentic self-expression. Schopenhauer concluded that this trade is almost never worth making. But society has convinced you that being alone is pathological, that there's something wrong with you if you prefer solitude, that you're missing out on life's greatest joy. This is what Schopenhauer would call collective delusion, the majority convincing themselves that suffering is actually happiness, so they don't have to face the truth about the choices they've made. Look at the couples around you honestly. Without the romantic filter society teaches you to view them through. How many seem genuinely happy versus how many seem quietly desperate, maintaining appearances while dying inside? How many are growing versus how many have stopped developing entirely, their lives consumed by relationship maintenance? The evidence is everywhere if you're willing to see it. Most people in relationships are less happy, less productive, less creative, and less authentically themselves than they were when they were single. But they've invested so much in the relationship, told so many people they're happy, built so much of their identity around being partnered, that they can't admit the truth even to themselves. Schopenhauer observed that we forfeit 3/4 of ourselves to be like other people. In relationships, you forfeit even more because you're not just conforming to society's expectations, you're conforming to your partner's expectations as well. You become a double prisoner, trapped both by what society says you should be and what your partner needs you to be. Neither version is who you actually are. This leads to the most profound question. Who are you really beneath all the performances, accommodations, and compromises you make to maintain relationships? Most people never find out because they never give themselves the solitude necessary to discover their authentic self. They move from their parents' house to roommate situations to romantic relationships, never spending enough time alone to develop a genuine identity independent of other people's needs and expectations. Schopenhauer spent years in solitude not because he was antisocial or dysfunctional, but because he understood that self-knowledge requires sustained time away from the distorting influence of other people's expectations. He discovered that the more time he spent alone, the more clearly he could think, the more productive he became, and the more at peace he felt. He wrote that a man can be truly himself only so long as he is alone, and if he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom. This is the key insight that will transform your understanding of loneliness. Freedom and solitude are inseparable. Every relationship you enter, no matter how loving or healthy, is a limitation on your freedom. You're choosing to constrain your choices, time, energy, and resources to accommodate another person's existence in your life. Sometimes those constraints are worth it, but Schopenhauer observed that in most cases, they're not. The benefits of companionship rarely outweigh the cost to your autonomy, peace, and development. Think about what you actually get from relationships versus what you give up. You get companionship, but lose solitude. You get emotional support, but lose emotional independence. You get validation, but lose self-sufficiency. You get comfort, but lose growth. When you honestly evaluate this trade, the math doesn't work in relationships' favor. Here's the truth most people spend their entire lives avoiding. You don't need another person to be happy. You need purpose, meaningful work, creative expression, physical health, financial security, and intellectual stimulation. None of these require a romantic partner. In fact, relationships often interfere with achieving these things because your time and energy are constantly diverted to relationship maintenance instead of personal development. Schopenhauer discovered that the happiest people aren't those in the best relationships. They're those who have developed such rich inner lives that they don't need relationships to feel complete. They've cultivated interests that fascinate them, work that gives them purpose, and internal resources that provide peace regardless of external circumstances. These people can enjoy relationships if they choose, but they don't need them. This is the critical distinction that transforms everything. When you need relationships, you're a slave to whoever can provide them. When you don't need relationships, you're free to choose them consciously from abundance rather than desperately from emptiness. The path to this freedom isn't easy. It requires sitting with loneliness until you've processed the withdrawal from social validation. It demands developing interests deep enough to sustain your attention without external stimulation. It necessitates building self-knowledge sufficient to enjoy your own company. But Schopenhauer promised that this work pays dividends that relationships never can. Complete freedom from neediness, authentic self-knowledge, uninterrupted time for creative and intellectual work, peace that doesn't depend on anyone else's mood or behavior, and the ability to love others from abundance rather than desperation. Most people will reject everything you've just heard. They'll argue that humans are social creatures, that relationships are natural and necessary, that love is the meaning of life. Schopenhauer would smile at their protests because he knew that people defend their chains most vigorously, insisting they're free while bound by neediness, validation-seeking, and the inability to be alone. The truth is that being lonely is better than being loved, because being loved is conditional, temporary, and ultimately enslaving. Love makes you dependent on another person's feelings, vulnerable to their changes, and trapped by their needs. Loneliness, when transformed through acceptance rather than resisted, becomes solitude, and solitude provides something love never can: complete sovereignty over your own existence. Right now, you're being given a choice that most people never consciously make. You can continue pursuing relationships out of fear of being alone, spending your life managing others' expectations at the expense of your own development. Or you can choose the path Schopenhauer discovered, embracing solitude, developing genuine self-sufficiency, and discovering that the companionship you thought you needed was actually preventing you from becoming who you're capable of being. This isn't about rejecting all relationships forever. It's about refusing to enter relationships out of neediness, fear, or the desperate attempt to fill internal emptiness that only self-development can address. It's about becoming so complete in yourself that you no longer need anyone else, and only from that position of completeness can you possibly have a relationship that doesn't destroy both people involved. The path forward is clear. Stop running from loneliness and start transforming it into solitude. Develop interests so compelling that hours disappear while pursuing them. Build work that matters more than any relationship ever could. Create internal peace that doesn't depend on external validation. Become someone who chooses relationships consciously rather than entering them desperately. This journey requires courage most people lack, but those who complete it discover something extraordinary. Freedom isn't found through relationships. It's found through the strength to be completely alone and completely content. Now you understand why being lonely is better than being loved. Love enslaves you to another person's fluctuating feelings and needs. Loneliness, transformed into solitude, liberates you completely. The question isn't whether you'll be alone. Everyone dies alone regardless of relationship status. The question is whether you'll develop the strength to embrace that aloneness and transform it into your greatest power, or whether you'll spend your life running from it into relationships that promise fulfillment but deliver only different forms of suffering. Schopenhauer made his choice and lived accordingly. He died alone but at peace, having produced work that continues shaping human understanding centuries later. Most people die surrounded by family they resent, having produced nothing but years of quiet desperation and compromise. Raise your hand if you genuinely felt Schopenhauer's truth cutting through the lies you've been told about relationships and loneliness. Drop in the comments, "I choose sovereignty over neediness," because that simple declaration marks the moment you stopped being a slave to biological programming and social conditioning. Your consciousness just expanded beyond what most people experience in their entire lives. Hit that subscribe button, because the next video reveals something even more uncomfortable that everyone denies, but secretly knows. And you're now one of the few strong enough to hear it. The content coming destroys more illusions than you're ready for, but you'll watch anyway, because you've tasted freedom, and you can't go back to comfortable lies. Stay alone, stay strong, stay sovereign.